Hey guys, tonight we step into a world that smells of incense, horse sweat, and the faint tang of burned bronze as you trudge through the dusty corridors of the Qin Palace, where young Prince Yingzheng stretches, yawns, and probably wonders if anyone actually survives this endless parade of tutors, eunuchs, and scheming courtiers. You probably won't survive this if you don't pace yourself, but don't worry, you're just imagining it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, comment below with your location and local time so I know where in the world you're dozing off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the cool stone beneath your fingers as the young prince stirs, a boy who is not yet an emperor but already restless, eyes flicking to the maps sprawled across his study. The officials whisper in corners, but you, invisible observer, notice his mind wandering far beyond the palace walls, to rivers, mountains, and territories that could one day bow to him. He's not much older than 13 when he starts practicing his calligraphy in secret, carving small characters into bamboo strips, each stroke precise, each thought a tiny rebellion against the tedium of court life. Historians still argue whether his early obsession with maps and borders is innate genius or a survival instinct in a court riddled with plots. You watch him as he sneaks into the gardens at dawn, inhaling the morning mist, imagining armies marching in perfect formation. There's a legend, probably exaggerated, that he once used crushed crocodile dung as sunscreen because some apothecary claimed it would make him invincible in battle. You can't help but smile at the absurdity, but beneath it, you see the germ of a mind that will one day think in terms of empires rather than playgrounds. His tutors, masters of Confucian wisdom, chatter endlessly, but you notice the prince's eyes wandering to the horizon, where he sketches fortifications in the dirt with a stick. He dreams of unity, control, and legacy, yet he is still a boy, prone to tantrums and fits of curiosity. Already, whispers of his cunning circulate. That child thinks too far ahead, mutter the ministers, not knowing that he is listening, always listening, filing every slight, every praise, every fear. The air in the palace is thick with possibility and danger alike. You can almost feel the tension of a life being shaped to bend history, the silent thrill of a young mind that will not settle for mere survival. And as the sun rises, you realize, this boy, small yet fierce, is quietly learning how to see the world not as it is, but as it could be, and perhaps as it should be in his vision. You trudge alongside the now teenaged prince as the palace corridors grow narrower with expectation, the weight of the dragon throne already pressing on his shoulders before he even touches it. Ascension is not ceremonial, it is a test of nerves, cunning, and the patience of a cat quietly circling its prey. The ministers shuffle about in silk robes, whispering of loyalty and deceit, while you sense the young emperor's gaze slicing through the pretenses. He doesn't just see people, he measures potential threats, calculating which smiles hide daggers and which bows carry secrets. Historians still argue whether his early paranoia was justified or merely the first signs of an obsession with control, but as you watch him, it's hard to tell the difference. The coronation itself is a spectacle that would make any modern celebrity blush. Drums, incense, and banners that flap like dragons' wings. You can almost smell the lacquered wood and the faint metallic tang of ceremonial swords. Courtiers kneel, and the new emperor nods, not yet with warmth but with precision. Every gesture is rehearsed, every expression honed. Yet behind those eyes, a restless curiosity lingers, the same spark you saw in the gardens years ago. You can feel it when he leans forward during council meetings, listening to debate, weighing advisors' words as if he's collecting pieces for some grand strategy game no one else can see. Early political maneuvers are subtle but brilliant. Alliances are tested, minor officials promoted or demoted, and you realize that the young emperor understands the palace as both a chessboard and a battlefield. He is careful yet daring, a diplomat with the patience of a monk, a strategist with the ambition of a lion. And yes, there are rumors, probably exaggerated, that he once ordered an entire wing of the palace reconstructed overnight because an advisor had misaligned a tile. You stifle a laugh, but in that moment, you sense that perfection is already beginning to outweigh mercy. Outside the palace, emissaries arrive from neighboring states, their gifts elaborate but often thinly veiled attempts at flattery or manipulation. You notice the prince's quick eyes scanning each envoy, calculating their loyalty, and filing away every misstep for later. He practices subtle intimidation without a word, just a glance, a pause, a shift of weight that makes even the boldest ministers reconsider their plans. His mind is restless, always 2 or 3 steps ahead, imagining scenarios no one else even suspects. In the quiet hours of the evening, when the incense smoke curls lazily toward the rafters, the emperor walks the palace alone. You follow silently, hearing the soft echo of his boots on polished stone. Here, in solitude, he sketches battle plans on silk, writes letters he may never send, and dreams of a unified realm. The boy who once marked bamboo strips in secret now contemplates empires. You can't help but shiver, imagining the power and pressure coiling within him, a quiet storm that will one day reshape an entire civilization. You step into the mind of the emperor as he begins to dream bigger than any walls or armies could contain. The warring states have fractured the land into dozens of petty kingdoms, each ruled by lords whose ambitions rival your own curiosity about how far this boy will go. You watch him tracing maps with a stick on the palace floor, imagining borders, trade routes, rivers as lifelines, mountains as natural fortresses. It's not just imagination, it's a vision, one that stretches beyond the present, beyond the daily bustle of palace life, beyond even the concerns of generals and advisors. Historians still argue whether his early obsession with unification was rooted in a genuine desire for peace or an insatiable lust for power, but standing beside him, you feel the intensity of his resolve. He dispatches scouts to neighboring territories, collects intelligence with meticulous care, and you see the beginnings of a campaign that will forever alter the landscape of China. You notice that the prince, now a young emperor, isn't just thinking militarily. He ponders law, economics, culture, standardizing weights, coins, and scripts so that even distant villages speak the same language of governance. It's methodical, almost obsessive, but it is visionary. And yes, there are rumors, probably exaggerated, that he once forced a minister to rewrite all official records overnight because a single character was slightly misaligned. You suppress a chuckle, imagining the panic in the scribe's chambers, and marvel at the sheer scale of the emperor's ambition. Campaigns against neighboring states begin with precision. You follow the armies as they march, disciplined and vast, banners fluttering like fiery dragons against the pale sky. The young emperor insists on leading from the front, straddling a white horse, observing formations, sometimes personally directing maneuvers. There are tales, perhaps fringe exaggerations, that he once slept on the battlefield under a tent of silk, believing it brought him divine protection. The soldiers whisper, some in awe, some in fear, that he is more than mortal, that his gaze alone can turn the tide of war. Yet the unification project is as much about symbolism as strategy. You see him imagining a country knit together not merely by conquest, but by shared laws and identity, a culture where a single edict can ripple from mountains to rivers without distortion. It's audacious, almost dizzying, to witness a teenager think in terms of empires rather than kingdoms, of centuries rather than seasons. You feel the weight of possibility pressing down on the palace walls, and on the young emperor himself, as he dreams a dream that will eventually stretch thousands of miles, etching his will into the very earth of China. You trudge alongside the emperor as he now becomes more than a strategist. He is a commander, a presence on the battlefield that radiates authority and quiet menace. You feel the earth tremble under the march of tens of thousands of soldiers, their banners snapping in the wind, horses snorting and pawing at the ground. You almost stumble over discarded armor, and you catch the acrid scent of fires burning in the distance, mingling with the dust kicked up by marching formations. Historians still argue whether his personal involvement in battles was crucial to his victories or if it was mainly symbolic. But standing here, you can see why the troops whisper that his presence alone inspires discipline and fear alike. The young emperor rides along the front lines, adjusting positions, signaling units with hand gestures so precise they seem almost like choreography. You notice his keen eyes scanning enemy formations, predicting movements before generals even finish giving their reports. There's a tale, probably exaggerated, that he once personally executed a messenger for delivering flawed reconnaissance, sending a shiver through the ranks that was part terror, part lesson in accountability. You shiver too, imagining yourself under that sharp gaze, wondering if a misstep could be your last. Military innovation thrives under his scrutiny. He experiments with new formations, learns the strengths of crossbow units, and uses river valleys as natural funnels for enemy troops. You trudge beside siege engines, massive contraptions that groan under their own weight, and imagine the manpower required to move them across muddy plains. It's exhausting just to watch. You realize the Emperor's mind doesn't rest even in battle. He calculates logistics, supply lines, and troop morale, considering every detail as if every ant in the army were part of a living machine under his command. Yet amidst all this strategy and discipline, the Emperor remains oddly attentive to human behavior. He notices soldiers' exhaustion, offering brief moments of encouragement, though always with an underlying note of expectation. Rest, yes, but only enough to march on. You can almost hear him thinking about the bigger picture, not just the current skirmish, but how these victories will echo across the newly unified land. The young emperor is becoming someone whose presence reshapes not only the battlefield but the very concept of leadership, blending ambition, control, and foresight in a way that will be remembered for centuries. You trudge on the fringes of the camp as night falls, torches flickering in the cold wind. You hear the murmur of the emperor's voice giving last-minute orders, see him studying maps by candlelight, and feel that familiar tingle of awe and unease. You're witnessing a mind that will bend mountains, armies, and eventually the imagination of history itself. You trudge beside the emperor as the idea of the wall begins to solidify in his mind, a colossal vision that stretches across mountains, deserts, and river valleys. He surveys the northern frontiers, where the Xiongnu and other nomadic tribes threaten the borders, and you sense the intensity with which he considers not just armies, but stone, earth, and timber as tools of defense. Historians still argue whether the wall was purely defensive or also a psychological assertion of power, but standing here, you can feel the strategy vibrating in the very air. The young emperor sketches lines in the dirt with a stick, imagining battlements, watchtowers, and signal fires that could flash messages across leagues in a heartbeat. Advisors are divided, some cautioning that the endeavor is impossible, a drain on resources, and morally questionable given the labor required. Others are dazzled by the audacity of his plan. You notice how he listens, nods thoughtfully, yet ultimately bends their hesitations into silent compliance. He begins sending surveyors to the mountains and plains, recording terrain, distances, and material sources, as if mapping not just the land but the future itself. There's a quirky anecdote whispered in court chronicles, probably fringe, that he sometimes rode atop construction carts just to feel the sweat of the laborers and gauge their speed, a strange mixture of empathy and obsession. Construction begins with small prototypes, stretches of rammed earth and wooden palisades, which the emperor inspects personally. You trudge alongside the workers, feeling the dust cling to your skin, hearing hammers against timber, the scrape of earth against stone. The scale is breathtaking. The wall is not merely a barrier but a living machine of defense, stretching across hundreds of miles, each brick and mound a testament to vision, planning, and human endurance. You notice him pausing to study natural choke points, thinking like a chess player, a tactician who anticipates enemy movements decades in advance. Even as the wall rises, the emperor remains restless. He observes construction in silence, occasionally offering a correction or approving a particularly ingenious solution, and you feel the weight of his presence pressing on both earth and spirit. The wall is as much a symbol as a fortification, a statement that this empire will not crumble, that its boundaries are etched not merely in maps, but in sweat, stone, and imagination. And as the sun dips behind the northern hills, you catch a glimpse of the emperor staring along the newly raised ramparts, already envisioning how the wall will shape not only defense, but legacy. You trudge among the laborers as the wall begins to take shape, a river of humanity flowing across hills and valleys. Thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, of peasants, convicts, and soldiers move in unison, carrying earth, stone, and timber, their bodies slick with sweat, their hands raw, faces streaked with dust. You can almost taste the metallic tang of effort in the air, hear the rhythmic chant of work songs, punctuated by the occasional shout of a foreman or the clang of tools. Historians still argue about the true scale of human cost, but witnessing it, you understand that every mile of wall is measured not only in stone but in countless lives quietly consumed by ambition. The emperor, as always, is present. You watch him traverse the construction sites, inspecting ramparts, sometimes climbing scaffolds to observe angles, sometimes stopping abruptly to issue precise orders. There are whispered stories, probably exaggerated, that he would occasionally execute workers for errors that could jeopardize the wall's integrity, and you shiver at the thought, yet also recognize the obsessive care in his perfectionism. Quirky legends even suggest he drank a mixture of crushed jade and herbs, believing it would grant him insight into the laborer's strength and stamina. Hard to imagine, but in this world, it fits. As the days stretch into months, you notice the repetitive rhythm of toil. Workers carry stones, ram earth, and lay bricks in patterns that, to outsiders, might seem arbitrary but in fact follow intricate designs meant to resist both time and enemy attack. Temporary villages spring up along the route, full of smoke, laughter, and occasional grief. You hear the creak of wooden wheels, the pounding of hammers, the grumble of exhausted men dreaming of home. And yet, even in this grueling environment, the emperor's presence is oddly galvanizing. He embodies both threat and inspiration, and people push further than they thought possible. At night, when torches cast long shadows over the ramparts, the emperor walks alone. You follow silently, noticing the faint creak of his boots and the soft murmur of wind against partially built towers. He reflects on progress, on setbacks, on the human cost of his grand vision. There's a serene, almost hypnotic quality to the wall at night, rows of mounds and timber lit by flickering flames, stretching toward the horizon, a tangible promise that the world will be reshaped according to one man's imagination. You can almost hear him whisper to himself, imagining generations walking these fortifications, unaware of the toil and sweat that carved them into the landscape, yet carrying forward the unbroken thread of his ambition. You trudge along the nascent wall as it snakes across mountains and deserts, the morning mist clinging to ramparts and watchtowers like a thin veil of mystery. The emperor surveys every stretch personally, noting slopes, gaps, and weak points with the precision of a master chess player. Historians still argue whether the wall's defensive success justified the immense labor invested, or if it was as much a symbol of dominance as a functional fortification. From your vantage, it's clear that both are true. The wall functions as a barrier, yes, but it also embodies the emperor's unyielding vision. Engineers and architects quarrel over materials and techniques, some advocating rammed earth, others stone, each with strengths and weaknesses. You watch the emperor listen patiently, then make a decision that surprises even the most seasoned experts. There's a quirky legend that he once tested stone durability by tossing it from atop a hill into a river, timing how long it took to break. You can't help but smile at the eccentricity, though it underscores his hands-on obsession with precision. As workers erect towers and platforms, the wall slowly transforms from concept into a monumental presence, stretching across valleys like a dragon frozen mid-flight. Enemy raids punctuate the construction, forcing quick adaptations in defensive design. You follow dispatches delivered by runners, each bearing sketches, reports, and urgent messages. The emperor responds with ingenuity, signal fires, garrison placements, and rapid repairs that seem almost miraculous. Historians still debate the effectiveness of these early defensive measures, but standing beside him, you feel the thrill of witnessing real-time tactical evolution. It's not just the wall itself. It's the strategy, the anticipation of enemy movement, the psychology of deterrence that transforms stone and earth into a living instrument of statecraft. At night, the wall glows under the lanterns, and you walk along its length, sensing the immense scale of labor, vision, and human endurance. Each tower, each fortified gate, each rampart is a testament to perseverance and ingenuity. And yet, the emperor remains restless, pacing the walkways, scrutinizing every detail as if time itself bends to his will. You almost hear him thinking aloud, imagining how these fortifications will endure generations, how borders may shift, how history will remember a wall that is both defensive mechanism and monumental declaration. The wall is no longer merely a project. It is an obsession, a visible echo of a man who measures every stone, every slope, and every heartbeat of the empire with relentless attention. You realize that, in witnessing this, you are walking alongside history in its most ambitious and meticulous form, where imagination, labor, and strategic genius converge into one endless, undulating monument across the horizon. You trudge through the bustling construction sites as the emperor's obsession with perfection intensifies, the wall now stretching like a serpentine spine across mountains and plains. Every morning, he rises before dawn, riding along the ramparts, inspecting the alignment of bricks, the slope of earthen embankments, and the placement of watchtowers with almost surgical precision. There's a certain rhythm to his presence, intimidating, meticulous, yet oddly mesmerizing. Historians still argue whether his perfectionism was visionary or tyrannical, but standing beside him, you feel both awe and tension, as if one misstep could unravel his carefully orchestrated order. You notice the emperor stopping frequently, pointing out details that seem trivial to others. A crooked beam, a loose stone, a slightly misaligned gate. But you realize that in his mind, each element is a link in a chain that will either hold or break under future pressure. Quirky tales circulate among the laborers, fringe stories about how he believed spirits guarded the wall and that each error would anger these invisible sentinels, a superstition that motivated him to perfectionist extremes. You can almost see the delicate balance between devotion and obsession in his gaze, a tightrope he walks as deftly as the soldiers climbing scaffolds. The psychological weight of control presses on him. You follow as he listens to reports, sometimes ignoring words and instead watching the expressions of those delivering them. He knows, instinctively, who is competent, who is lazy, who fears him. He moves through the workers, advisors, and generals with the same intent, precise energy, issuing corrections and praise in equal measure. Even minor innovations, like a new ramp design for moving stones faster, receive his scrutiny, and you can feel the subtle thrill he derives from watching theory materialize into reality. At night, the wall glows faintly under torchlight. You follow him as he climbs a tower, surveying the endless line of fortifications stretching into the darkness. Wind whispers past your ears, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and earth, the murmurs of laborers settling in temporary camps, and the distant sounds of wolves in the mountains. The emperor's eyes gleam with both satisfaction and insatiable hunger for improvement. He's become a living part of the wall, his presence embedded in every stone, every rampart, every mile that stretches across the land. You realize that obsession, ambition, and genius have fused here, producing a man whose vision will echo for millennia, shaping not just defense but identity, power, and imagination itself. You trudge through the newly unified lands, seeing the fruits of the emperor's vision beyond the wall itself. Roads wind across plains, canals divert rivers with engineered precision, and villages pulse with a new rhythm dictated by standardized weights, coins, and even the characters used in writing. Historians still argue how much of this cultural transformation was forced compliance versus genuine adoption, but standing here, you can feel the coherence of an empire being stitched together with meticulous care. Every decree, every standardized measure, every uniform script strengthens the thread connecting distant provinces to the throne, binding people through laws and symbols as much as through fear and respect. You notice the emperor visiting towns, observing markets, and even examining bridges and granaries. Quirky tales persist that he once disguised himself as a commoner to observe how people reacted to officials, testing loyalty and honesty in ways both ingenious and slightly terrifying. You can almost hear the murmurs among villagers, some thrilled, some fearful, all aware that this man, this emperor, measured not just armies and walls, but character, behavior, and potential. He is shaping a shared identity across the empire, one where commerce, law, and culture all align with his vision. Military garrisons are stationed along the wall, but also strategically throughout the empire, enforcing the emperor's decrees and providing security. You trudge past training grounds where soldiers drill in precise formations, crossbows clicking in unison, banners snapping in the wind. The emperor's influence reaches into even the smallest hamlets, standard weights for grain, uniform measurements for carpentry, and writing that allows remote officials to communicate without misunderstanding. Historians still debate whether such sweeping standardization suppressed local culture or forged a durable cohesion, but walking along these roads, canals, and fortified towns, you can feel the pulse of an empire alive with order. Even ceremonial matters are transformed under his hand. Festivals, rituals, and court ceremonies now reflect the unified aesthetic he envisions: grand, precise, symbolic. You notice the subtle messaging. The emperor is not just a ruler, but the living embodiment of unity, discipline, and foresight. Quirky legends suggest he sometimes recited his own edicts to empty halls, perfecting rhythm and cadence as if preparing them for future generations to echo through time. You realize that in consolidating laws, currency, script, and infrastructure, he is building a legacy as durable as the wall itself, a civilization-wide imprint that whispers his vision into every corner of the realm. You trudge along the corridors of history, where stories about the emperor diverge as sharply as the roads he built. Some chronicles praise him as a genius of unification, a visionary whose reforms brought peace and stability after centuries of fragmentation. Others depict him as ruthless, obsessed, a man for whom human life often seemed secondary to monumental ambition. Historians still debate his true legacy. Was he a benevolent architect of civilization or a tyrant whose perfectionism veiled cruelty? As you walk beside the echoes of his actions, you feel the tension between admiration and moral unease, a duality that will color every discussion about him for centuries. Fringe theories persist too. You hear whispered stories of secret alchemical experiments, elixirs of immortality, and hidden tunnels beneath palaces, rumors that mix intrigue, superstition, and a touch of fantasy. Some scholars suggest he believed the wall could channel mystical energy to protect the empire. Others insist these are merely tales to dramatize his legend. You almost laugh at the thought of him, hunched over crucibles in a dim chamber, muttering to himself about immortality while the wall snakes across mountains outside. Yet there's a subtle truth here. Obsession, imagination, and myth have always been intertwined in shaping the perception of great rulers. You observe how even today, millennia later, debates continue, whether the standardization of weights and scripts helped or stifled local cultures, whether forced labor was justified by the longevity of the wall, whether the emperor's paranoia and strict governance prevented rebellions or sowed seeds of resentment. You feel the weight of these discussions pressing against the remnants of stone, timber, and earth, the silent testimony of countless lives woven into his grand design. Quirky anecdotes linger too, like the tale of him testing his own bridge constructions by galloping horses over them, a mix of ingenuity, stubbornness, and a hint of vanity. Walking along these echoes, you realize that history itself is alive here, shaped as much by perspective as by fact. The emperor's story is both monumental and human, a blend of brilliance, obsession, and contradiction. You notice how his vision created an enduring symbol, a narrative that continues to inspire and provoke debate alike. The wall, the roads, the canals, the uniform script, they are not just physical achievements but lasting markers of ambition, control, and the human urge to shape the world. And as you trudge forward, you feel both admiration and unease, a sense that the emperor's shadow stretches across time, challenging every observer to measure both genius and consequence in equal measure. You trudge through the dim corridors of the emperor's final days, feeling the subtle shift from restless ambition to quiet reflection. Age has softened some of the sharp edges, though the intensity in his eyes remains. You notice the emperor pausing often, hands clasped behind his back, gazing at distant mountains and stretches of the wall that snake endlessly into the horizon. The labor, battles, and reforms have left their marks, yet his presence still commands awe. Historians still argue whether he felt true satisfaction at the unification he achieved or whether ambition gnawed at him until his final breath. But standing here, you sense the quiet grandeur of a life wholly devoted to vision. His thoughts drift toward mortality, the ephemeral nature of power and human life. You follow him silently as he walks past grand halls and empty courtyards, reflecting on the men, women, and soldiers whose sweat and toil built the wall and infrastructure that define his legacy. Quirky stories persist about his attempts to seek immortality, ingesting elixirs, consulting alchemists, and exploring sacred mountains, fringe beliefs that mirror his relentless desire to transcend human limits. You can almost hear him whispering to himself, acknowledging that while empires endure, rulers do not, a realization that casts a contemplative shadow across his achievements. As you linger near the wall under fading torchlight, you sense the emperor's thoughts extending beyond mere bricks and borders. He envisions generations walking these ramparts, unaware of the labor, fear, and ingenuity that forged them. The wall, rivers, roads, and standardized systems are more than fortifications. They are the embodiment of his will, a testament to human determination, and a monument to both brilliance and obsession. You notice the silence of the landscape, the whisper of wind through watchtowers, the faint echoes of laborers long gone, and the weight of history settling around you. In his final hours, the emperor contemplates not just conquest or control, but the meaning of legacy. The wall stretches like a spine of stone and earth across the empire, enduring beyond his life, a symbol of ambition, ingenuity, and perseverance. You realize that history has immortalized him not just as a ruler, but as a figure whose vision reshaped the land, the people, and the imagination of generations yet to come. And as the final light fades across the northern ramparts, you feel the stillness of achievement mingled with the inevitability of mortality, a poignant reminder that even the grandest dreams must eventually meet the quiet of time. The night deepens, and you find yourself tracing the contours of the wall with your mind's eye, feeling the cool night air brush softly across stone and earthen ramparts. Every mile you imagine stretches into shadowed valleys and moonlit plains, the faint murmur of wind whispering stories of the countless hands that shaped it. The emperor's presence lingers, a gentle hum woven into the rhythm of the empire, neither commanding nor pressing, simply there, like the memory of a heartbeat you can almost feel beneath your own. You notice the way the stars shimmer above the wall, distant yet steady, echoing the enduring nature of the work that human determination has carved into the earth. You slow your breathing and walk along imaginary pathways, listening to the soft creak of wooden watchtowers, the occasional distant howl of a wolf, and the gentle sigh of the wind as it brushes over stones and grass. The laborers' songs and chants fade into memory, replaced by the serene cadence of night. Each step along the wall seems lighter than the last, each mile stretching into infinite calm, a space where ambition, perseverance, and human fragility coexist peacefully. You feel your own body relax, letting the rhythm of centuries seep into your bones, the vastness of the landscape gently dissolving tension, worry, and thought. In this quiet, you sense the layers of history folding softly around you, the human triumphs and follies melting into a lullaby of stone, earth, and wind. The wall is no longer a project or a monument. It is a gentle guide, leading you through imagination, across mountains, through the quiet pulse of civilization itself. You allow the vision to fade gradually, carrying only the warmth of effort, endurance, and the calm whisper of dreams realized, leaving you wrapped in the serene hush of night, ready to drift toward your own rest.